Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was the avatar, master of all four elements. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was a symphony of glorious chaos, and Izuku Midoriya was born tone-deaf. In Musudafu, Japan, the impossible was the mundane. A woman on her way to the market casually elongated her neck to see over a crowd. A construction worker used his four muscular arms to lift steel beams with practiced ease. Children playing in the park shot harmless sparks from their fingertips and giggled when they floated a few inches off the ground. This was the age of quirks, the next great leap in human evolution, a biological lottery that had granted superhuman abilities to 80% of the population. For the other 20%, the world was a constant, glaring reminder of what they were not. They were the blanks, the throwbacks, the quirkless. And at 14 years old, Izuku Midoriya felt the full, crushing weight of that label every single day. He sat in his classroom at Aldera Junior High, a sea of adolescent potential surrounding him. The teacher, a man with the minor quirk of being able to stretch his fingers to absurd lengths, droned on about career paths. Now, as third-year students, it's time to start thinking seriously about your futures, he said, waving a stack of printouts. I would hand out these career aptitude tests, but why bother? He snatched the papers and tossed them into the air with a flourish. I know you all want to go into the hero course. The classroom erupted. Students showed off their quirks with boisterous pride. Fingers turned to stone, eyes glowed, small whirlwinds danced on desktops. It was a cacophony of power, a celebration of the genetic miracle that had passed Izuku by. He raised a tentative hand, the only one in the room not boasting an unnatural talent. Yes, Midoriya, you want to go to Yuri too, don't you? The teacher said, a hint of pity in his voice that was worse than any scorn. The room fell silent for a moment before bursting into derisive laughter. Midoriya? No way. You can't get into the hero course just by studying. The taunts washed over him, familiar and sharp. But it was the voice that cut the deepest that came from the desk behind him. DKU. Izuku flinched as an explosion rocked his desk, the heat prickling the back of his neck. He turned to face Katsuki Bakugo. His childhood friend turned relentless tormentor. Smoke wafted from Bakugo's palm. His crimson eyes narrowed into slits of contempt. You're worse than the rest of these rejects, you quirkless wannabe, Bakugo snarled. You really think you can stand in the same ring as me? And no, that's not it, Kakin. Izuku stammered, holding his hands up placatingly. I wasn't saying I could compete with you. It's been my dream since I was a kid. And you never know unless you try. Try. Bakugo slammed his hand down again, a sharp crackle of nitroglycerin-like sweat punctuating the word. What is there to try? You have nothing. You're an empty slate. You'd die in the exams. The bell shrieked, saving Izuku from further humiliation. As the other students filed out, chattering about their heroic ambitions, Izuku packed his bag with a heavy heart. His hand hovered over his most prized possession, Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. It was a treasure trove of knowledge, filled with his meticulous notes, sketches, and tactical breakdowns of every pro-hero he admired. But it held a secret section, one he never showed anyone, not even his mother. Tucked into the back, separated by a carefully drawn divider, was a different kind of analysis. The pages were filled with older, more elegant script. Here, he wasn't just analyzing quirks, he was studying a forgotten world, the bending arts, the header read. Ancient disciplines of elemental harmony. To modern society, bending was a myth, a collection of fairy tales from a pre-quirk era. Some scholars theorized it was the inspiration for certain elemental quirks, but most dismissed it as folklore. Izuku, however, was a true believer. He had spent countless hours in dusty libraries and on obscure internet forums, piecing together fragments of a history the world had left behind. He read of air nomads who could command the wind, of water tribes who could heal with the sea, of an earth kingdom whose people were as unyielding as the mountains, and of a fire nation whose citizens wielded their passion as a weapon. His notes were filled with theories Bakugo would have incinerated on sight. Kamui Woods' arbor quirk versus firebending, obvious weakness to combustion. However, A master waterbender might be able to manipulate the sap within the wood itself, causing structural failure from the inside. Could a highly skilled airbender use focused currents to desiccate the wood, making it brittle? It was a fantasy, he knew. But it was his fantasy. In a world of chaotic, unpredictable quirks, the idea of bending, of power born not from a genetic lottery but from discipline, spirituality, and a connection to the world itself, was a comfort. It felt balanced. We ain't done, Deku. Izuku looked up to see Bakugo and his two cronies blocking his path. Bakugo snatched the notebook from his hands. What's this? Hero analysis for the future? He sneered, his friends chuckling behind him. You're still doing this? It's pathetic. Give it back, Kaken. It's mine. Izuku pleaded. Bakugo ignored him, flipping through the pages until he reached the back. His sneer faltered, replaced by a look of genuine confusion, then disgust. What the hell is this crap? Elemental counters? Spiritual energy? Are you still obsessed with those stupid fairy tales? He held up a page depicting a figure in a defensive earth-bending stance. You think this hocus-pocus is real? Before Izuku could answer, Bakugo slammed the notebook between his palms. A sharp crack boom echoed through the empty classroom, and the notebook, now smoking and blackened, flew out the open window and landed with a soft plop in the koi pond below. Izuku's heart sank. You want to be a hero so bad? Bakugo said, a cruel, cold smile on his face. He placed a smoldering hand on Izuku's shoulder. I've got a time-saving idea for you. If you pray for a quirk in your next life, take a swan dive off the roof of the building. The words struck Izuku with the force of a physical blow. The air left his lungs. For a moment, the world went numb. Bakugo and his friends walked away, laughing, leaving Izuku standing alone, trembling with a mixture of rage and utter despair. He retrieved his soggy, scorched notebook, cradling it like a fallen bird. The ink had run, the pages were ruined, but the ideas within were still his. He walked home under a bridge, the dampness of the book seeping into his uniform, Bakugo's words echoing in his mind. Swan dive. He shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. He couldn't. He wouldn't. But the thought, poisonous and invasive, lingered. What future did he have? A gurgling sound from a nearby manhole cover broke his spiraling thoughts. Before he could react, a monstrous wave of green, viscous slime erupted from the sewer. It had two bulging, manic eyes and a grotesquely wide mouth. A medium-sized invisibility cloak, the sludge villain gurgled, its voice wet and distorted. You'll do perfectly. Panic seized Izuku in an icy grip. The sludge slammed into him, engulfing him. It was cold, thick, and suffocating. The fluid forced its way into his mouth and nose, a vile taste filling his senses. He clawed at the semi-liquid body, his fingers finding no purchase. His lungs burned. His vision began to tunnel, black spots dancing at the edges. I'm dying, he thought, a wave of terror washing over him. Is this it? Am I going to die without ever having done anything? His frantic mind, even in its last moments, turned to analysis. Liquid body, vulnerable to freezing, a cryoquark user could stop it. A firebender, no, too volatile in a sewer, an airbender could create a vortex, separating the solid matter of the eyes from the liquid. It was a useless, desperate thought. He was quirkless. He was no bender. He was just a boy, drowning on dry land. As his consciousness began to fade, a shadow fell over him. Have no fear, you are safe. A booming, familiar voice declared. The manhole cover shot off its moorings like a cannonball. For I am here, All Might. The #1 hero. The symbol of peace. He was here, his impossible smile cutting through Izuku's despair. Texas smash. The world became a hurricane. The sheer air pressure from All Might's punch was a physical force, a gale that blasted the sludge villain apart. The slime was ripped from Izuku's body, splattering against the tunnel walls. Izuku gasped, coughing up sludge and taking in the sweetest, most glorious lungful of air he had ever known. He felt a gentle tapping on his cheek and his eyes fluttered open to see the beaming face of his idol. Thought we lost you there, All Might said, his voice a warm baritone. He was already scooping the villain's remains into a soda bottle. It's all thanks to you, my boy. Your struggle tired him out and made him easy to capture. Izuku was starstruck. All Might in the flesh. He scrambled for his notebook, now a pulpy mess. An autograph. Please, he squeaked. He opened it to find All Might had already signed a fresh page. Thank you so much. This will be a family heirloom, he had to ask. The question that had burned in his heart for a decade. The question Bakugo had just answered so cruelly. All Might was about to leap away. A hero's work is never done. Stay safe. Wait. Izuku cried, desperation giving him speed. In a move he'd regret for the rest of his life, he latched onto All Might's leg just as the hero launched himself into the air. The flight was terrifying. The wind whipped at his face, threatening to tear him from his precarious hold. What are you doing? All Might yelled, trying to get a better grip on the boy. Letting go now is a bad idea. If I let go, I'll die. Izuku screamed back. All Might landed them roughly on the roof of a nearby department store. He looked furious, and a little strained. That was incredibly reckless. You could have been killed. Bang on the door, someone will let you down. He started to turn away. Please, just a minute. Izuku begged. I have to know. All Might sighed, a weary sound that seemed out of place coming from the symbol of peace. I'm out of time. He muttered, steam beginning to hiss from his body. Can someone without a quirk? Izuku's voice trembled, the words catching in his throat. He looked at the ground, unable to meet his idol's eyes. Become a hero like you? The question hung in the air. This was it. The final verdict on his life's dream, without a quirk. All Might said slowly. Izuku looked up, his heart pounding, ready for the answer that would make or break him. But he wasn't looking at All Might. In a sudden, shocking plume of steam, the mountain of muscle was gone. In his place stood a skeletal, emaciated man with sunken blue eyes and sharp, angular features. A trickle of blood ran from the corner of his mouth. Izuku stared, his mind refusing to process the sight. Where did All Might go? You're a fake. An imposter. The skeletal man sighed, a rattling sound from deep in his chest. I assure you, I am All Might. He lifted his shirt to reveal a horrific, gnarled scar that covered the left side of his torso, a spiderweb of ruined flesh centered on a deep, puckered crater. A nasty souvenir from a fight 5 years ago. My respiratory system was all but destroyed, and I lost my whole stomach. The surgeries have worn me down, and I can only do my hero work for about 3 hours a day. The rest of the time, this is what I look like. Izuku was speechless. The symbol of peace was broken. You asked if someone without a quirk can be a hero, the man, Toshinori Yagi, as he introduced himself, said, his voice now quiet and devoid of its former boom. To be frank, no, I don't think they can. The words were a hammer blow to Izuku's soul. Pro-heroes are always risking their lives, Toshinori continued, not unkindly. Some villains just can't be beaten without power. So no. I can't simply say you can be a hero even without a quirk. Izuku felt the last fragile remnants of his hope shatter. It was true. Everything Bakugo had said, everything the world had told him, was true. He was useless. It's a noble dream, Toshinori said, turning to leave. But you need to be realistic. As he walked towards the stairwell door, his foot nudged something on the ground. It was Izuku's notebook, which had fallen during the chaotic landing. Toshinori bent down, his joints creaking, and picked it up. Hero analysis. He read the singed cover. He idly flipped through the soggy pages, a flicker of sympathy in his sunken eyes. He saw the detailed drawings of heroes, the notes on their strengths and weaknesses. Standard fan stuff. Then, he reached the back section. His hand stopped. His eyes, which had been weary and distant, suddenly sharpened. The elegant script, the strange diagrams of figures manipulating wind and water, the theoretical notes on elemental counters. He looked from the notebook to the heartbroken boy standing before him. You study the old arts, Toshinori said, his voice barely a whisper. It wasn't a question. Izuku blinked, confused by the sudden shift in tone. The bending arts? It's just a hobby. A stupid fantasy. It is not a fantasy, Toshinori said, his gaze intense, pinning Izuku to the spot. He took a step closer, holding the notebook like a sacred text. My boy. I have been searching. For years, I've looked at pro-heroes, at promising students, at people with powerful quirks, and I've found nothing but chaos. Power without discipline. Strength without harmony. He looked at Izuku, truly looked at him, for the first time. But you saw the sludge villain in your mind, even in its panic, analyzed its weakness in terms of the elements. You have no power, but you instinctively understand balance. Tell me, why do you believe in them? In the benders of old? Izuku was completely bewildered. I don't know. The world. Quirks are so random. Someone is born with the power to create explosions from their hands, another can talk to squirrels. It's messy, bending. The stories say it comes from discipline. From a connection to the world. It feels right. Like it has a purpose beyond just having power. A slow, sad smile spread across Toshinori's gaunt face. It was the first genuine smile Izuku had seen on him. It does have a purpose, he said softly. The ultimate purpose. To maintain balance. He took a deep breath, a rattling affair. What I am about to tell you is a secret that has been guarded for generations, a truth so old that the world has forgotten it in the face of the new age of quirks. You must not speak of it to anyone. Izuku could only nod, his mind reeling. My quirk, Toshinori began, his voice taking on a storyteller's cadence, is not a quirk at all. It is a torch, a sacred power that is passed from one person to the next. Passed on? Izuku whispered. Like a legacy? Precisely. And the name it is known by in this modern era is One for All. One. For All. Izuku had heard whispers of it online, a fringe theory about All Might's mysterious power. But that is just its newest name, Toshinori continued, his eyes seeming to look through Izuku, into the past. Its true name, its ancient name, is the Avatar Spirit. The world tilted on its axis. Izuku's jaw dropped. The Avatar? But that's the greatest myth of all, the one person who could master all four elements, the bridge between the physical and spirit worlds. He vanished centuries ago. He did not vanish, Toshinori said, a profound sadness in his voice. The line continued. It was just quiet. When quirks began to appear, the world became louder, more chaotic. The disciplined arts of bending were overshadowed, dismissed as weak or niche quirks, and eventually forgotten by all but a few. The Avatar's duty became harder, trying to maintain a balance that was being torn apart by this new, explosive evolution. The power was passed in secret, from master to student. They called it One for All because the vessel inherited the strength and wisdom of all the past lives within them. He gestured to himself. I was the 8th inheritor in this modern line. I was born a firebender. A simple boy with a passionate heart and a strong sense of justice. My master, Nana Shimura, the 7th user and a master airbender, saw that spirit in me and chose me to be her successor. When she passed the torch to me, I became the Avatar. He closed his eyes, a memory playing across his face. Oh, my boy, you cannot imagine the feeling. To feel the wind answer your call, to feel the earth as an extension of your own body, to draw water from the very air and command the fire in your own soul. I was All Might. I was the Avatar, and I brought an age of peace. But the fight? Izuku prompted, completely enthralled. Toshinori's eyes opened, the light in them dimmed. He touched his scar. I fought a man whose power was the antithesis of mine. A villain named All for One. Where the Avatar spirit shares power and builds a legacy of unity, he steals it, hoarding it for himself. Our battle was cataclysmic. He did more than just wound my body. His voice dropped to a pained whisper. He poisoned my spirit. The injury was so grievous, so spiritually toxic, it severed my deep connection to the elements. Imagine a web connecting you to the world, threads of energy that allow you to feel and guide the wind, the water, the earth. He took a blade and slashed through those threads. He held up a trembling hand. All that is left of my power are the embers. The raw, physical strength stockpiled by the avatars before me, that is One for All's most well-known aspect. It is the core of the flame, but I can no longer shape it. I can punch with the force of a hurricane, but I can no longer command the wind. The world thinks the Avatar vanished 5 years ago because, in a way, they were right. I am but a shadow of what I was. Izuku was crying freely now, not from despair, but from a story so grand and tragic it felt as though the weight of history itself was settling on his shoulders. All his fantasies, all his secret studies, they were all real. And the greatest hero in the world was the last, broken incarnation of his greatest legend. I have been searching for a successor, Toshinori said, his gaze locking with Izuku's. Someone to pass the torch to before my embers fade completely. I needed someone with a true hero's spirit, and then, today, I saw you. You, a quirkless, powerless boy, saw your friend in danger, and you rushed in. Your body moved before you could think. Why? Because your spirit, your innate sense of balance and justice, demanded it. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Izuku's trembling shoulder. The hand was bony and weak, but it felt heavier than a mountain. I see it in you, my boy. A spirit that is worthy. A mind that, without any guidance, sought out the ancient ways. You are not an empty slate. You are a vessel, waiting to be filled. The world is out of balance, drowning in the chaos of quirks. It needs more than a symbol of peace. It needs a true avatar again. Toshinori's eyes burned with a fierce, rekindled hope. Izuku Midoriya. I deem you worthy to inherit my power. Izuku fell to his knees, overwhelmed. Me? He choked out. But I'm quirkless. I'm nobody. You were quirkless because the avatar spirit can only reside in a body that is not already dominated by another power. It needs a clean slate, Toshinori explained. You were not born a blank. You were born an empty vessel, destined for greatness. He smiled. You can become a hero. It was the sentence he had waited his entire life to hear. It flooded him with a warmth that pushed back all the years of pain, of loneliness, of despair. It was validation. It was hope. It was everything. He looked up at his idol, at the skeletal frame that held the spirit of a legend, and nodded, tears streaming down his face. Okay. A wide, triumphant grin split Toshinori's face, a flash of the old All Might. A good answer. Then, in a gesture that was both profound and deeply bizarre, he plucked a single strand of his golden hair. He held it out to the kneeling boy. The setting sun caught it, making it gleam like a filament of pure light. To inherit my power, All Might declared, his voice regaining a sliver of its boom. You must eat this. Izuku stared at the hair, then back at Toshinori's completely serious face. Huh! Toshinori chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. It's a ritual, my boy. A symbolic act. The body is a temple for the spirit. To forge the link, to begin the transfer of 1,000 lifetimes of spiritual energy, you must take a piece of my vessel into yours and make it a part of you. This is the first step on your journey. Izuku looked at the single strand of hair, glowing in the palm of the greatest hero he had ever known. It represented an impossible dream, a forgotten history, and a future he never could have imagined. In that single filament was the power of wind, water, earth, and fire. In it was the legacy of All Might. In it was the soul of the Avatar. With a trembling hand, he took the hair. He looked at Toshinori one last time, seeing not a broken man, but the keeper of the last embers of a dying flame, offering him the chance to become a bonfire. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and placed the hair in his mouth. It didn't taste like hair. For a fleeting moment, as it dissolved on his tongue, it tasted of ozone after a lightning strike, of petrichor after the first rain, of hot volcanic rock, and of a clean, crisp mountain breeze. A spark, infinitesimal but brilliant, ignited deep within his soul. It was a feeling of immense, terrifying, and beautiful weight. The weight of a legacy. His journey to become the #1 hero had just ended. His journey to become the Avatar had just begun. The hair tasted of paradox. For a single, fleeting moment on Izuku Midoriya's tongue, it was not hair at all. It was the crackle of static before a lightning strike, the mineral tang of a deep earth cavern, the briny spray of a storm-tossed sea, and the clean, sharp bite of wind on a mountaintop. It was ancient and overwhelming. Then, just as quickly it was gone, leaving behind only the mundane texture of a single strand of keratin and the lingering taste of his own saliva. He swallowed, and it was over. Nothing happened. He waited, kneeling on the rooftop, his body tense, expecting a surge of power, a glow, a divine revelation. He felt exactly the same, a skinny, tear-streaked 14-year-old with sore knees and a ruined notebook. Toshinori Yagi watched him, a gentle, knowing smile on his gaunt face. It is not a switch, my boy. It is a seed. You have planted it in fertile ground. Now the real work begins. The work of helping it grow. That work began before dawn the next day. The address Toshinori had given him led not to a pristine dojo or a high-tech gym, but to the coastline, specifically to Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, a place that had long ago ceased to be a beach and had become a monument to illegal dumping. The rising sun cast long shadows over mountains of rusted appliances, hills of defunct electronics, and dunes of plastic-choked refuse. The air was thick with the stench of decay and salt. It was a wound on the face of the city, a festering sore of neglect. Izuku stood beside Toshinori, who was wrapped in a thick coat against the morning chill, and stared at the junkyard that had swallowed the shore. All Might, why are we here? This is your training ground, Toshinori said, his voice a low rumble against the gentle lapping of the polluted waves. For the next 10 months, until the UA entrance exam, you will restore this entire coastline to its original state. Izuku's jaw dropped. He looked from the skeletal man to the horizon of garbage and back again. All of it? But that's impossible. It would take a team of heroes with construction quirks months to clear this. I don't have a quirk. Precisely, Toshinori said, turning to face him. His sunken eyes held a flicker of the old All Might fire. You are trying to become the vessel for the Avatar spirit, the bridge between humanity and the planet itself. Look at this place, Izuku. It is polluted, unbalanced, cluttered with the purposeless refuse of a society that takes more than it gives. It is a perfect metaphor for your own body right now. He tapped a thin finger on Izuku's chest. You are weak. Your limbs have no strength, your core has no stability. You are a fragile container. If I were to pour the full power of One for All into you now, you would shatter like glass. The power needs a worthy vessel. He swept his arm out, indicating the sea of trash. This is not just physical conditioning. This is a spiritual exercise. To command the elements, you must first connect with them. To connect with them, you must respect them. By cleaning this beach, by separating the metal from the plastic, by moving every piece with your own 2 hands, you will be performing an act of service to the earth. You will attune your body and your spirit to the very environment you wish to one day command. The Avatar is the world in human form. If your own vessel is cluttered and weak, how can you expect to connect with the greater whole? You will make your body a temple, and you will do it by cleansing this one first. Izuku stared at the task before him. It was gargantuan, Sisyphean. But the logic, filtered through the lens of the bending lore he had so cherished, was undeniable. Harmony. Balance. It started here. It started with him. So, he said, his voice filled with a new, shaky resolve. Where do I start? Toshinori grinned, and for a moment, his smile was so bright it seemed to rival the sun. He pointed to a rusted, hulking refrigerator half buried in the sand. With that, the first month was hell. Izuku's days became a grueling routine. Wake up at 4:30 a.m., meet Toshinori at the beach, and begin the labor. His muscles screamed in protest. His hands, even with thick work gloves, were a canvas of blisters and cuts. He would drag a single, waterlogged tire a few feet and collapse, gasping for breath, his body feeling like a collection of frayed nerves. Toshinori did not help. He supervised, he coached, he corrected. He had designed a brutal workout regimen called the American Dream Plan, which dictated every moment of Izuku's life, from his diet to his sleep schedule. When Izuku was hauling a broken engine block tied to a rope, Toshinori would sit atop it, shouting encouragement and criticism. Your form is sloppy, my boy. Lift with your legs, not your back. The earthbenders of old drew their strength from their stance, from their connection to the ground beneath them. Feel that connection. Izuku, sweat and tears mingling on his face, would try. He'd plant his feet, try to feel the sand, the bedrock deep below, the planet's very core. But he felt nothing, just the burning in his thighs and the searing pain in his shoulders. The spiritual training was even more frustrating. Meditate, Toshinori would command during breaks. Close your eyes. Don't just hear the waves. Feel their rhythm in your heartbeat. Don't just feel the wind on your skin. Trace its path from the ocean to the shore. The elements are always speaking. You just haven't learned the language yet. Izuku would sit there, eyes squeezed shut, and try. He would focus until his head ached, searching for that internal spark, that connection Toshinori spoke of. He'd reach out with his mind, trying to nudge a single leaf, to stir a puff of dust, to coax a drop of water from a discarded bottle. Nothing. The world remained stubbornly silent, inert. The seed of the Avatar spirit lay dormant, buried deep beneath the soil of his own physical limitations. It's not working, All Might, he gasped one afternoon, having spent an hour trying and failing to levitate a small pebble. I've been at this for 2 months. I'm getting stronger, but I don't feel anything. I can't bend. Toshinori placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Patience, Izuku. The first gate is always the most difficult to unlock. Every avatar has a natural affinity for one element, usually the one from their native culture, but you were born without that initial connection. You are building it from scratch. For now, let us focus on what you can control. He guided Izuku to a wrecked pickup truck. The stockpiled power of One for All. It is raw, kinetic force. It has no elegance, not without the elements to shape it. It is a battering ram. To access it, you must focus all of your energy into a single point. He demonstrated, clenching his fist. Imagine a raw egg in a microwave. If you heat it evenly, it cooks, but if you focus all the energy on it at once, it explodes. Izuku finished, his eyes wide. Exactly. Right now your body is the egg. Use the full power, and you will explode. We need you to learn how to use 5% of the microwave, Toshinori explained. But for a true emergency, sometimes you need to break the egg. The key is to channel it through your entire body, and then, in the final moment. He struck a pose, his face a mask of ridiculous intensity. You must clench your buttocks and scream from the very depths of your heart. Smash! Izuku stared, nonplussed. Clench my buttocks? It's about total body tension. Toshinori insisted, a bit defensively. It's a crude method, a shortcut to accessing the raw power without the fine control of bending. It is the way of the embers, not the shaped flame. Try it, Izuku tried. He hauled back, clenched every muscle he possessed, and screamed, SMASH. At the truck, a faint green energy, like static electricity, crackled around his arm for a half-second before fizzling out. He hadn't so much as dented the rusted metal. He had, however, pulled a muscle in his back. The months crawled by. Winter's chill gave way to the humid heat of spring. The mountains of trash began to shrink. Izuku's body transformed. The soft, pudgy frame was burned away, replaced by lean, corded muscle. He could now drag the refrigerator he once couldn't budge. He could carry 3 tires at a time. The local residents, who had once averted their eyes from the blight, started to watch the lone boy and his skeletal mentor with curiosity, then with admiration. By the 9th month, a vast stretch of the beach was pristine. The sand was clean, the water lapped gently on a shore free of debris. Izuku, now a sinewy and determined young man, stood atop the final, towering pile of garbage, the morning sun at his back. He let out a roar, a cry of pure, cathartic triumph that echoed across the water. It was the sound of 10 months of pain, struggle, and unrelenting effort. He had done it. Toshinori, standing on the cleared sand below, transformed. In a plume of steam, his skeletal frame swelled into the colossal form of All Might. Oh! My goodness! He boomed, his voice shaking the very air. He pulled out his phone and showed Izuku a picture of the crying, scrawny boy he had been 10 months prior. You did it, my boy! You are a worthy vessel! Izuku, weeping with joy and exhaustion, fell from the pile of trash. All Might caught him easily. The transfer was complete. The seed was planted. The vessel was ready. Now, all that was left was the exam. The gates of UA High were even more magnificent and intimidating in person. Izuku stood before them, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He was surrounded by a sea of teenagers brimming with confidence and crackling with power. A boy with engine-like calves stretched nearby. A girl with pink skin and strange, horned antennae chatted excitedly with a friend. Izuku felt a familiar wave of inadequacy wash over him. He had the spirit of the Avatar inside him, but he still couldn't move a single grain of sand with his mind. All he had was a body honed by 10 months of hard labor, and the terrifying, all-or-nothing prospect of one for all. He took a step forward and promptly tripped over his own feet. He braced for impact with the hard pavement, but it never came. He found himself floating, suspended a few inches from the ground. A girl with a round, cheerful face and rosy cheeks stood over him, one hand extended. "Whoa, sorry about that," she said, her voice bright and warm. "I used my quirk on you so you wouldn't fall. It's a bad omen, right? Tripping before a big test?" She helped him to his feet, her touch deactivating her zero-gravity quirk. "Man, I'm so nervous." "Aren't you?" Izuku, his face burning red, could only stammer a string of incoherent noises. He had just been saved by a girl. A very nice girl. Inside, the orientation was a sensory assault. The pro-hero present Mike screamed instructions from a stage, his voice a physical force. The rules were simple, a 10-minute mock battle in a massive, simulated urban environment. The opponents were robots, each worth a certain number of points. The goal was to score as many villain points as possible. A tall, serious-looking boy with glasses stood up and chopped the air with his hand. "Sir, on the handout, there are 4 types of villains listed, yet you have only mentioned 3. Is this a misprint? And you?" He swiveled and pointed directly at Izuku. "You have been muttering this entire time. It is distracting. If you are not taking this seriously, then you should leave." Izuku squeaked and covered his mouth, humiliated. He had been unconsciously analyzing the rules, whispering theories about bending applications. A waterbender could short-circuit the robots easily. An earthbender could trap them or use metal bending on their armor. It was a habit he couldn't break. They were herded into buses and taken to their respective battle centers. Izuku found himself at the gate of Battle Center B, his nerves frayed raw. He saw the kind girl from the entrance, and wanted to go thank her, but President Mick's voice blasted from hidden speakers, signaling the start. Gah! The massive gates slid open. While Izuku was still processing, the other applicants shot past him in a blur of quirks and motion. The boy with engines in his legs was gone in a flash. A spiky-haired kid propelled himself forward with explosions. Izuku was left standing in the dust, alone. "Okay, calm down, analyze," he told himself, forcing his panicked mind to work. "I can't use bending. It's not there yet. So it has to be one for all. But All Might said even 5% would be too much. If I use it, I'll break myself. I have one shot, maybe. I have to make it count. Find a group of low-point robots, use a single smash, and hope for the best." He ran into the city, his heart pounding. The sounds of combat were everywhere, explosions, crashes, the shriek of tearing metal. But every time he found a robot, someone else beat him to it. A blur of purple spheres, a flash of blue laser, a whip of thorny vines. He was too slow, too hesitant. The other applicants were a whirlwind of practiced power, and he was just a boy running through a war zone. Minutes ticked by. 5, 6, 7, 0 points. The despair was a cold, heavy weight in his gut. This was it. After all the training, all the hope, all the promises, he was going to fail. He was still just useless Deku. He hid behind a building, trying to catch his breath, tears of frustration stinging his eyes. Then, the ground began to tremble. A shadow fell over the entire street. Izuku peered around the corner, and his blood ran cold. Towering over the buildings, its single red eye scanning the area, was the zero-pointer. The obstacle President Mike had warned them to avoid. It was a mechanical behemoth, a walking skyscraper of metal and rivets, more of a natural disaster than an opponent. The other students were running, screaming in terror. "It's not worth any points. Just run." Izuku turned to run, too. and then he heard it. Ouch! A pained whimper. He looked back and saw her. The nice girl from the entrance. Her leg was pinned under a huge slab of concrete, debris from the zero-pointer's rampage. She was trapped, directly in the path of the advancing giant. Something inside Izuku shifted. The fear, the despair, the frantic calculation of points, the crushing weight of his own failure, it all vanished. It was burned away in an instant by a white-hot, singular thought that consumed his entire being. She's going to die. His legs were moving before he was aware of it. He burst out from behind the building, running not away from the danger, but directly towards it. The world seemed to slow down. He could see the terror in her eyes, the way the giant robot's shadow crept over her. He saw the other students running away, their faces masks of self-preservation, and in that moment he felt a profound, selfless, and absolute wave of protectiveness. It was not a desire to be a hero, not a desire for glory or recognition. It was a pure, instinctual, and overwhelming need to save her. That pure intent was the key. It slid into a lock deep within his soul, a lock he never knew existed, and turned. The seed of the Avatar spirit, dormant for so long, finally, violently, broke through the soil. As he ran, he felt a strange lightness in his legs. It wasn't just his muscles pumping, he felt a current at his back, urging him on. As he leaped into the air, a phenomenal force propelled him upwards, higher and higher, as if the sky itself had reached down and thrown him towards his target. For the first time, the wind was not an obstacle, it was an ally. It was a part of him. He was soaring, 100 feet in the air, level with the zero-pointer's head. He pulled his right arm back, and the power of One for All, the raw, stockpiled energy of his predecessors, surged through him. Green, lightning-like energy crackled around his limbs. But it wasn't alone. The air itself seemed to answer his call. A visible vortex of wind began to swirl around his clenched fist, compressing, tightening, screaming with kinetic potential. He was no longer just channeling the embers of One for All. He was feeding them with the boundless freedom of the sky. He threw the punch. The sound was not a simple crunch of metal. It was a deafening, explosive roar, the sound of a tornado being born. His fist, the epicenter of the raw power of One for All, connected with the robot's head. The cyclone of airbending, unleashed in a single, uncontrolled blast, did the rest. The zero-pointer's armored face didn't just dent. It imploded. The wind, focused and impossibly powerful, ripped through the machine's superstructure. Metal peeled back like fruit skin, rivets popped like champagne corks. The entire upper torso of the colossal robot was shredded, torn apart from the inside out by a tempest of his own creation. The shockwave blew out windows for 3 blocks. For a glorious second, Izuku hung in the air, a silhouette against the exploding robot, a god of the storm. Then, the pain hit. The power he had channeled was far too great for his unprepared body. He felt a sickening, white-hot snap in his right arm as the bone fractured in a dozen places. The backlash of the untamed elemental energy surged through his legs, the very limbs that had been lifted by the wind, and they too shattered. The power vanished, leaving him a broken puppet in the sky. He was falling. Plummeting towards the ground, his body a useless ragdoll. I used my one shot, he thought, his vision blurring. But I have 0 points. I broke myself, for nothing. Just before he hit the pavement, a sharp slap to his cheek jolted him. He felt a strange, weightless sensation as his rapid descent slowed to a gentle float, stopping an inch from the ground. He saw the nice girl, now free from the rubble, her face pale, one hand outstretched towards him before she collapsed from exhaustion. The klaxon sounded, signaling the end of the exam. Izuku lay there, broken and spent, surrounded by the stunned silence of the other applicants, and the wreckage of his impossible feat. His consciousness faded into a merciful black. He awoke to the gentle, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor, and the sweet taste of gummies. An elderly woman with her hair in a tight bun and a giant syringe for a cane stood over him. "Ah, you're awake," she said, popping another gummy into her mouth. "You really did a number on yourself, Sonny. One heck of a power you've got there." This was Recovery Girl, the youthful heroine. Her quirk, heal, could amplify a person's own restorative abilities. She had just finished kissing his forehead, mending his shattered bones. "Your arm and both legs were pulverized," she explained, her tone professionally chipper but her eyes holding a trace of concern. But it was the strangest thing. The fractures weren't clean breaks, not like from simple impact or recoil. The energy signature was bizarre. It was almost as if your own power turned on you, tearing you apart from the inside out. Be careful with that thing, you hear? A few more stunts like that, and I might not be able to fix you. The next week was agony, and not just from the residual aches. He was certain he had failed. 0 villain points. One spectacular, self-destructive act of foolishness. He replayed it in his mind 1,000 times. The feeling of the wind, the roar of the cyclone, had it been real? Or just a hallucination brought on by panic and the sudden surge of One for All? The letter from Yue arrived on a gray, drizzly afternoon. His hands trembled as he opened it. His mother hovered nervously behind him. He half expected a rejection slip to fall out. Instead, a small metal disc clattered onto his desk. It flickered to life, projecting a hologram into the center of his room. I am here. As a projection, All Might, in his full, glorious hero form, stood before him. Young Midoriya. I know you have been waiting, my boy. You passed the written exam with flying colors, but you are probably thinking you failed the practical, with your score of 0 villain points. Izuku's heart sank. But that was not the whole story. All Might boomed. A hero's job is not just to defeat villains, but to save people. And the UA entrance exam would be a poor test of heroic potential if it did not reward that spirit. Behold, the hologram switched to a video feed of the exam. He saw the girl with the round face, Achiko Uraraka. All Might identified her, speaking to present mic. Excuse me, sir, she was saying. That boy with the messy green hair. Can he get some of my points? He saved my life. He took on that giant robot all by himself just to save me. The videos showed other students chiming in, talking about how Izuku's incredible, selfless act had inspired them. Your actions touched the hearts of your fellow examinees. All Might declared, reappearing. And so, the faculty awarded you for your heroism. You, Izuku Midoriya, have earned 60 rescue points. Izuku stared, tears welling in his eyes. 60 points. He had passed. He had actually passed. And that's not all, All Might said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious, more personal. The message was now for Izuku alone. That final act. It was more than just a smash. You felt it, didn't you? The power you have been searching for. The hologram shifted again, showing a diagram from one of Izuku's own notebooks. A stylized drawing of an air nomad monk. The monks of the old Air Nation taught that the path to their element was through freedom, All Might explained, his voice filled with pride. Freedom from earthly concerns, from worldly desire, from your own fear. In that moment when you ran to save young Uraraka, you achieved that. You cast aside all thought of yourself, all fear for your own safety, all desire to pass the test. You acted from a place of pure, selfless freedom. And in doing so, you unlocked the first gate. All Might looked directly at him, his holographic eyes seeming to pierce Izuku's very soul. The smile on his face was one of profound, world-changing significance. Welcome to your hero academia, Izuku Midoriya. You have much to learn. Because your journey does not just begin today. A gust of wind, a phantom breeze from the hologram itself, seemed to swirl through the room. You are an airbender. The UA high uniform felt like a costume from a dream. It was crisp, impeccably tailored, and heavier than any clothing Izuku had ever owned. It was heavy with the threat of possibility, with the weight of the promise All Might had made to him on that rooftop. As he looked at his reflection, he saw not just Izuku Midoriya, the boy who was once quirkless, but a student of Japan's most prestigious hero academy. He saw the potential, however faint, of the world's next avatar. The phantom sensation of the wind from the entrance exam was a constant, tantalizing memory. It was like trying to recall the melody of a half-forgotten song. He knew the feeling was real, but he couldn't grasp the notes. He couldn't summon it at will. He'd spent the last week in his room, trying to meditate, trying to nudge a pencil across his desk with a focused gust of air, but nothing happened. The gate had been unlocked in a moment of pure, selfless crisis, and now, in the calm, it seemed to have swung shut again. He was walking into UA. with a borrowed power he couldn't control and an ancient art he couldn't command. He was an impostor, armed with a secret too grand to comprehend and a power too dangerous to use. His mother Inko fussed over his tie, her eyes shining with tears of unrestrained pride. "Oh, Izuku! You look so handsome. So heroic. I still can't believe it. My baby at UA. And your quirk. It's so powerful, even if it's a little destructive." She bit her lip, her gaze flicking to the lingering memory of his pulverized limbs. "Just be careful, sweetie." "I will, Mom," he promised, the words feeling hollow. How could he promise to be careful with a power that was inherently a self-destruct button? The sheer scale of UA was breathtaking. The main building was a monument of glass and steel, a testament to the modern age of heroes. He found his classroom, 1A, the door comically oversized. Taking a deep breath, he slid it open and stepped into his future. The room was already buzzing with the electric energy of teenage ambition. He recognized several faces from the exam. And then he saw him. The tall, serious boy from the orientation was arguing with another student, his hands chopping the air with rigid precision. It was Katsuki Bakugo, of course, who was on the receiving end, his feet kicked up on his desk in a posture of pure arrogance. "Take your feet off that desk," the serious boy commanded. "Such an action is an insult to our upperclassmen and the master craftsmen who built this furniture. Like I care, you damn extra!" Bakugo snarled, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "What junior high you from, huh? You a stuck-up elite? I'll enjoy blowing you to bits." The serious boy recoiled as if struck. "I am Tenya Ida, from the esteemed Somei Private Academy." "Somei?" Bakugo's grin widened. "So you are a damn elite. Looks like I found my new favorite target." As Ida turned away, fuming, his eyes landed on Izuku. He marched over, his movements stiff and robotic. "It's you! The one from the orientation!" he declared. "I am Tenya Ida." "I heard," Izuku stammered. "I'm Izuku Midoriya." "It's nice to meet you, Midoriya," Ida said, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I must apologize. I completely misjudged you during the exam. While I was focused on the rules, you grasped the true nature of the test. You understood that the spirit of heroism outweighs the mere accumulation of points. You were the superior candidate." Before Izuku could respond, a cheerful voice cut in. "Oh, it's you! The plain-looking boy who smashed that giant robot." He turned to see the kind, round-faced girl from the entrance. Achiko Uraraka. His face instantly flushed crimson. "You got in! Just like President Mike said." She beamed. "That punch was amazing. It was like BWHOSH. You know? And that windy cyclone thing? So cool. I'm Uraraka, by the way. And Midoriya," he managed to squeak out, his brain short-circuiting. She was talking to him. She thought he was cool. Bakugo, who had been watching the entire exchange, let out a low growl. His crimson eyes were fixed on Izuku, burning with a mixture of disbelief and pure, unadulterated rage. Deku. The quirkless, useless Deku was here. At UA. In Class 1A. And these people were treating him like he belonged. It was an aberration, an insult to the natural order of things, and Bakugo looked ready to correct it with extreme prejudice. The classroom door slid open again, but no one entered. A voice, monotone and utterly devoid of energy, drifted from the floor. "If you're here to make friends, you can pack up your things and leave." The class fell silent. Lying on the floor just outside the door was a yellow caterpillar. Or rather, a yellow sleeping bag with a man inside it. He took a long sip from a juice pouch before unzipping himself and standing up with a weary sigh. He was a tall, scruffy man with tired, bloodshot eyes, a mess of black hair, and a capture weapon that looked like a bundle of scarves wrapped around his neck. "It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down," he said, his voice flat. "Life is short. You're all too irrational." He scanned the room, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second longer on Izuku. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Now, put these on and meet me on the field." He tossed the UA gym uniform onto his desk. The locker room was tense. The other boys chattered nervously, speculating about what was happening. A pop quiz? A welcoming ceremony? Izuku changed quickly, his mind racing. Aizawa's stare had felt pointed, analytical. He knew the teacher's hero name, Eraserhead. His quirk, Erasure, allowed him to nullify another person's quirk just by looking at them. It was a power perfectly suited for a man who seemed to value logic and efficiency above all else. On the training field, Aizawa held up a device. "We're having a quirk apprehension test." The class erupted in confusion. "But what about orientation? And the welcoming ceremony?" Uraraka asked. "Here at UA, we're not bound by pointless traditions," Aizawa stated, his gaze sweeping over them. "You've been using your bodies for years without the logical application of your powers. We're here to break that habit." "Bakugo." He tossed a softball to the explosive team. "You finished first in the practical exam. What was your best softball throw in junior high?" 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. "Try it with your quirk," Aizawa instructed. "Do whatever you want, just stay in the circle." Bakugo stretched his arms, a wicked grin on his face. He wound up and threw the ball with a thunderous explosion. "Dai!" he screamed, the force of the blast propelling the ball into the stratosphere. Aizawa showed the class the result on his device, 705.2 meters. The class gasped in awe. "Awesome! This looks fun!" someone shouted. Aizawa's expression turned grim. "Fun? You think this is fun? You have 3 years to become a hero. You think it's all going to be games and recess? Unacceptable." A dark, predatory smile spread across his face. "Whoever comes in last place in these 8 tests will be judged to have no potential, and will be expelled on the spot." A wave of terror washed over the class. Izuku felt his blood run cold. Expelled? On the first day? This wasn't a test. It was a culling. Aizawa wasn't just a teacher, he was a gatekeeper, and his gaze was fixed firmly on the student with the most illogical, unstable quirk in the class. The first test was the 50-meter dash. Izuku was up against Bakugo. As the starting pistol fired, Bakugo ignited his palms, launching himself forward like a human missile. "Burst speed," he roared, finishing in 4.13 seconds. Izuku just ran. He pumped his arms and legs, his body strong from the 10 months of beach cleaning, but it was purely physical. He tried to feel the wind, to coax a current to his back, but there was nothing, just a burn in his lungs. He finished in 7.02 seconds, one of the slowest times. The grip strength test. A boy with multiple arms scored over 540 kilograms. Izuku, with his newly developed muscles, managed a respectable 56 kilograms, but it was nothing compared to the superhuman feats around him. Standing long jump? He landed in the middle of the sandpit, while Bakugo and a student with a tail vaulted clear across it. He was failing. In every event, he was performing like a physically fit but ultimately normal teenager. The power of the Avatar, the raw force of One for All, it was all locked away. He could feel Aizawa's dead-eyed stare on him, a silent judgment. The teacher's skepticism was a palpable force, pressing down on him. "I knew it," that stare seemed to say. "A fluke. A one-trick pony whose one trick breaks him. He has no place here." Finally, it was the last event, the ball throw. This was it. His last chance? He had to do something. He couldn't use a full power smash. He'd break his arm and be useless for the rest of his school career, proving Aizawa's point. He had to try and tap into that other power. He had to find the wind. He stepped into the circle, the softball feeling like a lead weight in his hand. The other students watched him, whispering. "That's the guy who destroyed the zero-pointer, right? What's his quirk? So far he hasn't done anything." Izuku closed his eyes. He ignored the whispers, ignored Aizawa's piercing gaze. He tried to remember the feeling from the exam. Not the raw power, but the release. All Might's words echoed in his mind, freedom from earthly concerns, from your own fear. He couldn't force it. He couldn't command it like a soldier. It wasn't about command. It was about harmony. He took a deep breath, and instead of focusing on the power he wanted to project, he focused on letting go. Letting go of the fear of expulsion, of the need to impress, of the pressure to live up to All Might's legacy. He just focused on the simple act of throwing the ball. He wound up, his motions fluid, and as he threw, he felt it. It wasn't the roaring tempest from the exam. It was a flicker, a spark. A gust of wind, sudden and sharp, answered his call. But it wasn't a clean, focused jet. It was a chaotic, messy vortex of air that erupted from his hand. It kicked up a massive cloud of dust and debris, forcing his classmates to shield their eyes. The ball was caught in the maelstrom, tumbling erratically through the air before landing with a soft thud. The vortex dissipated as quickly as it had formed. Izuku coughed, blinking the dust from his eyes. Aizawa held up the device. 46 meters. A pathetic score. The class was silent, confused. Bakugo let out a sharp, derisive laugh. What was that, Deku? He sneered. You trying to give us all pink eye? Aizawa walked towards him, his expression unreadable. I was watching you, Midoriya. That little whirlwind of yours, it had no focus, no control. And your energy signature, it's a mess. He took a step closer, his eyes glowing a faint, menacing red. His black hair began to float, and the scarves around his neck stirred as if alive. I erased your quirk. Izuku felt a strange sense of loss, as if a string connecting him to the world had just been snipped. He tried to feel for the wind, and for the first time, he was met with absolute, profound nothingness. It was the familiar emptiness of being quirkless again. The entrance exam was a logical fallacy, Aizawa said, his voice low and dangerous. An applicant with a self-destructive power that offers no tactical advantage is a liability, not a hero. You shattered 3 limbs to take down a single, non-sentient target. In a real fight, you'd be a casualty needing rescue after your first move. You are a one-trick pony, and your trick is suicide. He leaned in, his red eyes boring into Izuku's soul. You cannot be a hero with a power you can't control. The words were a direct echo of All Might's own initial assessment, but stripped of all kindness, sharpened to a razor's edge. I've returned your quirk, Aizawa said, his hair falling back into place. You have one more throw. Show me you're not a lost cause. Or you're going home. This was the final ultimatum. Izuku stood in the circle, his heart hammering against his ribs. He couldn't replicate the freedom of the entrance exam on command. His first attempt at controlled airbending was a disaster. A full smash would break him and get him expelled. He was trapped, but Aizawa's words, as harsh as they were, sparked a thought. Control. All Might's analogy of the egg in the microwave. He couldn't use the full power, but maybe he didn't have to. What if he could focus all of it? Not through his whole arm, but through a single, tiny point? Channel the full, cataclysmic power of one for all into the tip of one finger. It would still break, but it would be one finger, not his entire arm. It would be a demonstration not of raw power, but of control. And the air. His first attempt was a chaotic vortex because he had tried to push. But airbending wasn't about pushing. It was about guiding. What if he didn't try to create a storm? What if he just created a single, focused nozzle? He took a deep breath, planting his feet firmly in the dirt, feeling the solidness of the ground beneath him. He held the ball and pulled his arm back. He could feel the immense, terrifying power of one for all welling up inside him, a sea of green energy desperate to be unleashed. He forced it down, compressing it, channeling it through his shoulder, his elbow, his wrist, all the way down to the tip of his right index finger. The digit began to glow, the skin turning red, then purple, under the strain. At the same time, he reached out with that other sense, the one that had just flickered to life. He didn't try to summon a vortex. He pictured a single, narrow stream of air, a high-pressure jet, aimed directly at the ball. He threw. As his arms swung forward, he released the power. A blinding flash of green light erupted from his fingertip. Simultaneously, a sharp, whistling jet of air shot from his palm, perfectly cradling and guiding the ball. The raw, explosive force of one for all provided the propulsion. The focused airbending provided the guidance system. The ball shot off like a cannonball. It didn't tumble. It flew true and straight, leaving a visible distortion in the air behind it. It broke the sound barrier with a sharp crack, ascending in a perfect arc, higher and higher until it was just a speck against the blue sky. The shockwave from the release slammed into Izuku, But it was focused, not chaotic. The ground beneath his feet cracked from the sheer force of him bracing himself. And his finger. He looked down to see his right index finger was a mangled, swollen, and grotesquely purple mess. The pain was excruciating, a sharp, blinding agony, but it was contained. It was a single, broken finger, not a broken arm. Silence. The entire class stared, dumbfounded. The device in Aizawa's hand beeped. He turned it around. 705.3 meters. He had beaten Bakugo. By 1/10 of a meter. Izuku stood there, panting, cradling his broken finger, a triumphant, pain-filled grin on his face. He looked at his teacher. "Mr. Aizawa," he said, his voice shaking but firm. I can still move." Aizawa stared at him for a long moment. He looked at the impossible score, at the broken finger, at the determined look in the boy's eyes. And a slow, wide, almost terrifying grin spread across his face. "This kid," he murmured, a flicker of something that looked like approval in his tired eyes. Bakugo was frozen in place, his face a mask of incandescent fury. His jaw was clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. Deku. Useless, quirkless, pebble-in-the-road Deku, had a power like that, and he had beaten him? An explosion ripped from his palm without conscious thought. "DKU, you bastard!" he screamed, launching himself forward. "Tell me how you did that or you're dead." Before he could reach Izuku, he was ensnared. The capture weapon around Aizawa's neck had shot out, wrapping around Bakugo's body, immobilizing him instantly. "Stop using your quirk." "I'm getting dry," Aizawa said, his eyes glowing red again. "We're wasting time." The rest of the tests were a blur of pain for Izuku. He managed to get through them, his performance hampered by his injury, but he had made his point. When the final results were posted, he was in last place. He felt a chill run down his spine. "By the way," Aizawa said, his back to the class as he began to walk away. "That whole expulsion thing was a logical deception." The class stared in disbelief. "It was a rational falsehood to push you all to your limits," he explained, pausing to look over his shoulder. "It was obvious from the start." A girl with a large, black ponytail, Momo Yayorozu, Izuku recalled, looked aghast. "Of course it was. I'm sorry, I should have said something." "That's it, we're done for the day," Aizawa said. He handed Izuku a slip. "Go see Recovery Girl. And Midoriya." Izuku looked up. "You have the power of a hurricane trapped in a teacup. Learn to pour it, or you'll flood everything around you. Don't make me regret my decision." It was the harshest praise Izuku had ever received, and it felt like the greatest victory of his life. After a painful but quick healing session with Recovery Girl, who scolded him soundly for his flagrant disregard for his own bone structure, Izuku met All Might on a secluded rooftop of one of UA's auxiliary buildings. The wind was stronger up here, carrying the distant sounds of the city. Toshinori stood in his skeletal form, looking out at the horizon. "A broken finger," he said without turning around. "An improvement, I suppose? You were reckless. But you were also clever." Izuku, clutching his now-healed finger, bowed his head. "I had to. He was going to expel me. I couldn't use a full smash, and my airbending, it's not working right." "Of course it isn't," Toshinori said, finally turning to face him. His expression was gentle. "You are approaching it like a quirk. Like a weapon to be aimed and fired. That is the way of the embers, my boy. That is my way now. But it is not the way of the elements." He walked over to Izuku and placed a thin hand on his shoulder. "The power you used today, the finger flick, was the raw force of One for All. It is a necessary tool for you right now, a crutch until you can truly walk. But it is not the path. The path is bending." He gestured to the open sky around them. "Tell me about the air nomads." Izuku blinked, surprised by the change in topic. "They were monks. Pacifists. They lived in temples on high mountains, detached from worldly affairs. They valued freedom and life above all else. It said the last herd of sky bison were their original masters." "Correct," Toshinori nodded. "And their philosophy was infused into every aspect of their bending. Air is the element of freedom. The air nomads did not attack with brute force. They evaded, they redirected, they moved with the currents, not against them. They found the path of least resistance. You, today, tried to punch with the wind. That is like trying to punch water. You will only tire yourself out and make a mess. You cannot force the wind to obey. You must invite it to dance. He pointed to a series of vents and flagpoles on the rooftop. My master, Nana Shimura, was an air nomad by temperament, if not by birth. She taught me the basics before I even inherited one for all. She would set up a training course of spinning gates and hanging chimes. The goal was not to get through as fast as possible. The goal was to pass through without causing a single gate to spin, without making a single chime ring. He looked at Izuku, his eyes full of the wisdom of a bygone era. Your task is not to learn how to punch harder with the wind. Your task is to learn how to become the wind, to move so freely, so lightly, that the world barely notices you are there. That is the foundation. From that quiet center, true power is born. He stepped back. I cannot build you a set of spinning gates. But the principle remains. For the rest of the afternoon, your training is this: move between those flagpoles and vents. Do not try to be fast. Try to be quiet. Try to be air. With that, Toshinori coughed, gave a final nod, and left Izuku alone on the rooftop. The wind whipped around him, tugging at his gym uniform. He looked at the makeshift obstacle course. It seemed simple, almost childish. He took a running start, trying to be nimble, and promptly misjudged the distance to a large air conditioning unit, slamming his shoulder into its metal casing with a loud clang. He slumped to the ground, rubbing his shoulder, frustrated. He had the spirit of the Avatar, the power of all might, and the potential to command the very elements of the planet, and he couldn't even get past the flagpole without tripping. But as he sat there, feeling the wind on his face, Aizawa's words came back to him. A hurricane in a teacup. He was trying to unleash the storm. All Might and Aizawa, in their own vastly different ways, were telling him the same thing. He needed to learn how to pour it. He stood up. He took a deep breath, not of air, but of the feeling of air. He closed his eyes and thought not of power, but of freedom. He took a single, slow step. Then another. He wasn't a hero in training trying to master a power. He was a student, at the very beginning of a very long lesson. The foundation of a new age was not built with a single, cataclysmic smash, but with one quiet, balanced, and purposeful step at a time. And with a fierce, burning determination lighting his eyes, he took the next one. The days following the quirk apprehension test settled into a rhythm that was both exhilarating and utterly exhausting. UA High was less a school and more a crucible, designed to forge heroes through relentless pressure. Normal academic subjects in the morning were a welcome, if slightly dull, respite before the main event, hero basic training in the afternoon. This was All Might's class. He would burst through the door, his voice a tidal wave of enthusiasm. I am coming through the door like a normal person. And the mood in the classroom would instantly shift. His presence was a tangible force, a beacon of overwhelming optimism. For Izuku, however, it was a complex and nerve-wracking dance. He had to maintain the illusion that All Might was just his teacher, not his mentor, not the previous avatar who had entrusted him with the fate of the world. Their stolen moments of private training on rooftops and in secluded gyms were the real core of his education. But here, in the open, they were strangers. The first hero basic training exercise was the battle trial. It was Izuku's first chance to wear the hero costume he had designed, a simple green jumpsuit with a respirator mask that mimicked All Might's iconic smile. His mother had added a hood with long, ear-like protrusions, making him look something like a green rabbit. It was dorky, but it was his. He was paired with Ochiko Uraraka, the girl whose life he had saved, against the team of Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida. The scenario was simple, heroes versus villains, with the villains guarding a mock nuclear weapon. The moment the teams were announced, Izuku felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. Bakugo's eyes, burning with a furious, obsessive light, locked onto him. This wasn't a training exercise for Bakugo. This was a reckoning. We need a plan, Uraraka said, her voice pulling Izuku from his fearful trance. Bakugo will come straight for you for sure. He seems intense. That's an understatement, Izuku muttered, his mind racing, flipping through pages of analysis he had compiled on Bakugo over the years. Kaken's fighting style is built around overwhelming offense. He uses his explosions for mobility and to create openings. He's reckless, but he's not stupid. He'll use the narrow corridors of the building to his advantage, maximizing the concussive force of his blasts. He started muttering, his mind going into its analytical overdrive. The key isn't to meet him head-on. That's a losing battle. The key is evasion. The word hung in the air. Evasion. The path of least resistance. The way of the airbender. He'll expect me to use that power from the ball throw, Izuku reasoned, thinking aloud. He'll expect a big, destructive punch. So we do the opposite. Uraraka, your quirk is zero gravity. You're the key to our offense. My job is to be the distraction. I'll lead Bakugo on a chase, keep him occupied. You use that time to find Ida and the weapon. The plan was sound, but as they entered the building, the air thick with tension, Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. It was one thing to theorize about airbending philosophy on a quiet rooftop. It was another to put it into practice against a living, breathing engine of destruction who wanted to personally annihilate him. Bakugo ambushed them almost immediately, just as Izuku had predicted. A massive explosion ripped through the hallway, the heat scorching Izuku's cheek. He reacted on pure instinct, shoving Uraraka out of the way and diving into a roll. Come on, Deku! Bakugo snarled, emerging from the smoke and fire, his eyes wild. Don't dodge. Let's see that fancy power of yours. He launched himself forward, his right hand crackling. Izuku didn't try to block. He didn't try to punch. He remembered All Might's words, become the wind. He dodged left, letting the explosion sail past him. He felt a faint, whisper-thin current of air at his back, aiding his movement, making him a fraction of a second faster than he should have been. It wasn't a powerful gust, just a subtle nudge, like an invisible hand guiding him away from harm. The chase was on. Bakugo, enraged by Izuku's refusal to fight, relentlessly pursued him through the labyrinthine corridors. Explosions tore chunks from the walls, filling the air with dust and the smell of burned sugar. Izuku didn't fight back. He moved. He weaved, he ducked, he jumped. He used Bakugo's own destructive power against him, using the smoke for cover, the debris as obstacles. He was a leaf on the wind, constantly in motion, always just out of reach. He could feel it, the connection growing stronger with every near miss. Each dodge wasn't just a physical act. It was an affirmation of the air nomad philosophy. He wasn't conquering Bakugo. He was yielding to his force, letting it pass by harmlessly. With every successful evasion, the whispers of the wind grew a little louder, the nudges a little more pronounced. He could create small puffs of air to change direction mid-jump, a soft cushion to break a fall. It was clumsy, intuitive, and a world away from the hurricane he had unleashed at the entrance exam, but it was control. Finally, Bakugo cornered him. He unleashed a massive, wide-arc explosion designed to be inescapable. Izuku, with nowhere left to dodge, had only one option. He leaped upwards. A focused jet of air, stronger than any he had summoned before, shot from the soles of his feet, propelling him high into the air. He soared over Bakugo's head, landing gracefully behind him. Bakugo stared, dumbfounded. You can fly now?" he breathed, his rage momentarily replaced by utter disbelief. While Bakugo was distracted, Uraraka had found Ida. Her voice came crackling through Izuku's earpiece. "I found him. But he's cleared the room. There's nothing for me to make float." They had one last chance. A desperate, insane plan formed in Izuku's mind. He spoke quickly into his calms. "Uraraka, get to the pillar directly above the weapon." "Ida, I'm coming for you." He turned to face Bakugo, who was now trembling with a rage so profound it was almost silent. "Why won't you use it against me, Deku?" he whispered, his voice dangerously low. "Do you think you're better than me? Have you been mocking me with this hidden power all these years?" "That's not it, Kaken," Izuku said, planting his feet. He had run long enough. Now, it was time for the final move. "It's because you're amazing that I have to give it my all." He pulled his arm back, and the familiar green lightning of One for All crackled to life. Bakugo's eyes widened, a savage grin spreading across his face. Finally, they rushed at each other. But Izuku wasn't aiming at Bakugo. At the last second, he angled his arm upwards, towards the ceiling. He screamed, channeling all the power, all the desperation, all the hope he had into a single, devastating blow. Smash! The punch connected not with flesh, but with the concrete ceiling. The entire building shook. The upward blast of raw power tore through floor after floor, creating a massive, gaping hole that went all the way to the top level where Uraraka was waiting. The resulting debris, a storm of concrete and rebar, rained down into the weapon room. Now Uraraka! Izuku screamed. Uraraka, clinging to the pillar, slapped her hands down. Release! Comet home run! She used her quirk on the pillar and swung it like a baseball bat, sending the shower of debris directly at Ida. As the villain was forced to protect himself from the onslaught, Uraraka floated gently down and landed on the weapon. The hero team wins! All Might's voice boomed through the building. Izuku collapsed, his right arm shattered, the bones broken and twisted from the force of the punch. The backlash from One for All, even when not directed at a person, was still immense. He lay on the ground, panting, his vision swimming, but a smile was on his face. He had won. Not by overpowering his opponent, but by outthinking him. He had used the raw power of the embers and the subtle guidance of the wind in concert. It was his first true victory, as a hero in training. The Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ, was a sprawling biodome designed to train students in rescue scenarios. It was an architectural marvel, containing a shipwreck zone, a landslide zone, a fire zone, and more, all encircling a central plaza. The students of Class 1A stood in awe, accompanied by Aizawa and the Space Hero, 13. It looks like Universal Studios Japan. Someone yelled, and a murmur of excited agreement went through the class. 13, a hero whose quirk, Black Hole, was designed for rescue, not combat, was explaining the purpose of the facility when the lights flickered and died. The central fountain sputtered and went still. A strange, dark purple mist, like a spreading stain, coalesced in the center of the plaza. From it, dozens of figures began to emerge. They were not actors. Their movements were too sharp, their eyes too hungry. These were villains. A man with pale blue hair, his face and body covered in disembodied hands, stepped out last, scratching his neck with a frantic, agitated energy. "Where is he?" he rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "I went through all the trouble of bringing so many friends. All Might, the symbol of peace, isn't here?" Aizawa's entire demeanor shifted. The lazy, tired teacher vanished, replaced by the grim, hyper-focused pro-hero, Eraserhead. 13, protect the students, he commanded, his capture weapon unfurling. Kaminari, try to get a signal. These villains are real. Before anyone could fully process the reality of the situation, Aizawa launched himself into the fray. He was a whirlwind of motion, a master of quirk-augmented combat. He nullified the powers of villains with a glance, ensnaring them in his capture weapon, his movements a brutal, efficient ballet. The purple mist, which was in fact a villain himself, shot forward, blocking the students' escape. "We are the League of Villains," the mist man declared, his voice smooth and unnervingly polite, "and our purpose is to kill All Might. It seems he is absent. Perhaps if we kill a few of his students, he will deign to make an appearance." The mist expanded, engulfing the students. Izuku felt a terrifying sense of vertigo as the world dissolved into purple darkness. He was falling, tumbling through a void. He landed with a massive splash in cold water. He surfaced, sputtering, in the middle of the shipwreck zone. The ship was a full-sized vessel listing in a large, artificial lake. He wasn't alone. Tsuyu Ajiri, the frog-like girl, and Minoru Mineta, the tiny, perpetually terrified boy with purple spheres on his head, surfaced beside him. The water churned. Villains with aquatic quirks began to surround them, circling like sharks, their grins wide and predatory. "This is bad," Ribbit Ajiri said, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to Mineta's hysterical screaming. Izuku's mind, honed by crisis, went into overdrive. "Okay, water. Natural weakness for some, advantage for others. My airbending, can I use it here?" "They don't know our quirks," Izuku said, his voice sharp and focused, surprising even himself. That's our advantage. They probably think Ajuiz is just a frog appearance. They think Mineta is just short, and they think I have some kind of super strength. He looked at the murky water. A waterbender could have ended this in seconds. But he wasn't a waterbender. Not yet. He had to use what he had. Mineta! He yelled. Throw your spheres into the water. As many as you can. Mineta, crying, tore the sticky purple balls from his head and threw them frantically into the lake. They floated on the surface, creating a strange, lumpy minefield. Azuri, you can stick to surfaces, right? And your tongue is long and strong? Izuku asked. 20 meters, ribbit, she confirmed. Okay. Grab Mineta and me. We're getting out of the water. Azuri's tongue shot out, wrapping around their waists. With a powerful kick of her legs, she launched them out of the water, high into the air, towards the ship. As they flew, Izuku focused. He created a small, controlled cushion of air beneath them, softening their landing on the slick deck. It was a minor use of his power, but it felt solid, real. The villains in the water, seeing their prey escape, charged the ship. A villain with a shark-like head slammed into the hull, trying to capsize it. Now what, Midoriya? Mineta shrieked. We're trapped. We're not trapped, Izuku said, looking down at the churning water and the floating field of purple spheres. He remembered the smash he had used against Bakugo, the raw, concussive force. He pulled his arm back, channeling one for all into his finger. But this time, he didn't aim at an enemy. He aimed at the water. Delaware smash! He flicked his finger. The resulting blast of compressed air wasn't a punch, it was a shockwave. It slammed into the surface of the lake like a depth charge. The water erupted, creating a massive, swirling whirlpool. The villains were caught in the vortex, sucked down towards the center. Mineta's sticky spheres were drawn in with them, clinging to the flailing villains, sticking them together in a helpless, screaming mass. In a single, calculated move, he had neutralized all of them without causing any lethal harm. Mineta and Azuri stared at him, their eyes wide with awe. That was amazing, Ribbit. It's not over, Izuku said, his finger throbbing with a familiar, searing pain. He looked towards the central plaza. He could see Aizawa, a lone warrior against a sea of villains, and standing beside the hand-covered man was something else. A hulking monstrosity, easily as tall as All Might, with dark purple skin, an exposed brain, and dead, bird-like eyes. We have to help him, Izuku said, his voice grim. They made their way back to the plaza just in time to see the unthinkable. Aizawa, despite his incredible skill, was overwhelmed. The hand-covered man, Shigaraki, rushed forward and grabbed Aizawa's elbow. Aizawa let out a cry of pain as the skin and muscle on his arm began to crumble into dust. You're so cool, Eraserhead, Shigaraki rasped, his voice filled with a childish, gleeful cruelty. But you're just one man. He gestured to the purple beast. Noma. Finish him. The creature, the Nomu, moved with unnatural speed. It slammed Aizawa's head into the concrete with a sickening crunch. It broke his arm as easily as a twig. It was a display of brutal, overwhelming force. Izuku watched in horror, his body frozen. Azuri had to cover Mineta's eyes. Just as the Nomu was about to deliver a final, crushing blow, the doors to the USJ burst open. All Might stood there, and he was not smiling. His face was a mask of cold, righteous fury. It's fine now, he declared, his voice a low, threatening thunder. For I am here. He moved in a blur, dispatching the remaining low-level villains and rescuing the fallen Aizawa in a single fluid motion. He stood before Shigaraki and the Nomu, the symbol of peace radiating an aura of absolute power. I've been waiting, hero, Shigaraki giggled, scratching his neck. You trash. The fight was titanic. All Might's punches, which could change the weather, barely seemed to faze the Nomu. The creature's fists, equally powerful, met his in earth-shattering collisions. All Might soon realized the truth. Shock absorption? He grunted, dodging a blow that cracked the ground beneath him. That's right. Shigaraki cackled. Nomu was specifically designed to withstand your 100% power. He's your perfect counter, your living punching bag. All Might was being pushed back. The time limit on his muscle form, exacerbated by the fact that he had already done some hero work that morning, was rapidly approaching. Steam began to hiss from his body. He was getting slower, his punches less impactful. The gnome grabbed him, its immense strength pinning his arms, and began to squeeze, trying to crush him in a monstrous bear hug. All Might's back was bent at an unnatural angle, his face contorted in pain. A wound on his side, the location of his great injury, began to bleed sluggishly through his costume. "What's wrong, All Might?" Shigaraki taunted. "Getting tired? Is the great symbol of peace finally running on empty?" Izuku watched from the edge of the plaza, hidden behind a rock with Azuri and Mineta. His heart was a frantic drum of terror. All Might was losing. His mentor, the greatest hero in the world, was being broken before his eyes. The embers were fading. Panic gave way to a cold, hard resolve. He couldn't just stand there. He couldn't let his mentor fall. It was not a choice. It was a duty. A certainty. It was the same feeling he'd had when he saw Uraraka trapped, but this time it wasn't a flash of selfless freedom. It was a feeling of immovable, unyielding defiance. "I will not let this happen." The thought was a command. It resonated deep within his soul, striking a chord that had never been played before. The second gate, the gate of substance, began to tremble. He felt a connection not to the air around him, but to the ground beneath him. He felt its solidity, its weight, its ancient and patient strength. He felt the bedrock deep below, the tectonic plates, the very mantle of the planet. For a fleeting instant, he was not a boy standing on the earth, he was the earth itself. "Azuri Mineta," he said, his voice low and steady, devoid of its usual tremor. "Stay back." He stepped out from behind the rock. "What are you doing, Midoriya?" Azuri whispered frantically. "You'll be killed." He didn't answer. He walked forward, his eyes fixed on the struggling form of All Might. Shigaraki saw him and let out a dismissive chuckle. "Oh look, another NPC has joined the party. What are you going to do, kid? Cheer him on?" Izuku ignored him. He planted his feet, widening his stance. He bent his knees, sinking his weight down, feeling the solid connection to the ground. He remembered the diagrams from his secret notebooks, the stances of the earthbenders of Ba Sing Se. Strong. Rooted. Unmovable. He was a mountain. He was a wall. As the gnome squeezed, applying the final, crushing pressure that would snap All Might's spine, Izuku acted. He didn't punch. He didn't even move his arms. He lifted his right foot and stomped it down onto the concrete with all his might. It was not a physical act of strength. It was a spiritual command. Crack them. The ground did not just crack. It erupted. A massive slab of concrete and earth, 10 feet wide, tore upwards from the plaza floor directly beneath the gnome. It was not a complex shape, not a refined piece of bending. It was a raw, brutal expression of defiance. A primal upheaval of the planet itself. The stone pillars slammed into the gnome with the force of a tectonic event. The creature, whose body was designed to absorb kinetic impact from punches and kicks, had no defense against the very ground beneath it turning into a weapon. Its grip on All Might was broken as it was thrown off balance, stumbling back with a cry of what sounded like genuine surprise. All Might, freed from the crushing grip, fell to one knee, gasping, steam pouring from his body. Shigaraki stared, his single visible eye wide with disbelief. What? What was that? That wasn't a strength quirk. The gnome, enraged, swatted the pillar of rock aside, shattering it into rubble. It turned its dead eyes on Izuku, identifying him as the new, primary threat. It charged, its fist cocked back for a blow that would obliterate him. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't run. He stood his ground, his feet rooted to the spot, his arms held out to his sides. He was the barrier. He was the wall between the monster and his mentor. He braced himself for the impact, a silent, unyielding stance against an unstoppable force. The sight of this small, determined boy standing defiant, ready to sacrifice himself, reignited the last of All Might's embers into a roaring inferno. The symbol of peace would not let his student, his successor, pay the price for his own weakness. "You are right, villain," All Might roared, pushing himself to his feet, his body screaming in protest. "My power is weakening. But the spirit of a hero, never fades. He moved faster than the Noma. He appeared between the monster and Izuku, his fist pulled back. But this time, he wasn't just throwing a punch. He was channeling every last drop of One for All, every ounce of his will. A real hero, he bellowed, his voice echoing through the dome, is someone who always finds a way to break past their limits. You said your monster was made to withstand my 100%? Then I'll just have to go beyond that. He threw a punch. And another. And another. Each one faster and stronger than the last, a percussive storm of blows that battered the Nomu, whose shock absorption couldn't keep up with the sheer volume and ferocity. Go beyond. Plus. Ultra. With a final, cataclysmic punch, he sent the Nomu flying. It shot up through the roof of the USJ, a rapidly shrinking speck against the sky, disappearing into the heavens. The resulting explosion of wind pressure nearly blew everyone off their feet. The USJ was filled with a sudden, ringing silence. All Might stood there, one fist raised, steam pouring off him so thick it was like a fog. He was a statue of victory, but Izuku could see the truth. He was at his absolute limit. He was a hollow shell, held together by sheer willpower. You may have cheated, Shigaraki hissed, scratching his neck so violently that blood began to fleck from under his fingernails. But you're not a god. You're weakened. I can still kill you. He and the mist villain, Kurojairi, rushed forward for one last, desperate attack. But Izuku was already moving. He ran, grabbing the weakened All Might and pulling him back, placing himself once again between his mentor and the danger. Before Shigaraki could reach them, the doors to the USJ slammed open again. This time, it was the entire UA faculty, led by Principal Nizu. The cavalry had arrived. Shigaraki skidded to a halt, glaring at the assembled pro-heroes. Game over, he rasped, a sound of pure frustration. Let's go home, Kurojairi. He cast one last, hateful glare at Izuku. I'll kill you next time, you cheating little glitch. Then, the two of them were gone, swallowed by the purple mist. The aftermath was a scene of controlled chaos. The remaining villains were rounded up. The injured were tended to. Izuku stood beside All Might, who was now barely able to maintain his muscle form. You were reckless, my boy, All Might said, his voice a low whisper. You could have been killed. So could you, Izuku whispered back, his own body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. I felt it. The ground. It was like I could feel its strength. All Might placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. The earth. The element of substance. The earthbenders of old taught that strength comes not from aggression, but from neutrality, from waiting, and listening, and knowing the right moment to act. When you stood your ground for me, you embodied that principle. You stood unyielding. And the earth answered you. He smiled, a tired but deeply proud expression. You have unlocked the second gate. The gate of substance. You are an earthbender. Izuku looked down at his feet, at the cracked and broken concrete of the plaza. He had done that. He had commanded the very ground beneath him. It was a power that felt fundamentally different from the freedom of the air. It was solid. It was real. It was ancient. He had two elements at his disposal now. He was 2 steps closer to his destiny. But as he looked at the bloodied and broken form of his teacher, Eraserhead, and the weakened shell of All Might, he knew that with every gate he unlocked, the enemies he would have to face would only become more monstrous. The path of the Avatar was not one of glory, but one of immense, terrifying responsibility. The aftermath of the USJ attack left a scar on the soul of Class 1A. The adrenaline faded, replaced by a heavy, sobering silence. The villains were real. The danger was not a simulation. Their teachers could be broken, and the symbol of peace could bleed. The world, which had seemed like a bright, 4-color comic book of heroic adventure, had suddenly revealed its darker, grittier pages. For Izuku Midoriya, the experience was a profound and terrifying realignment of his entire existence. He lay in his bed at home that night, staring at the ceiling, his body a canvas of aches and exhaustion. His finger, healed by Recovery Girl for the second time, still throbbed with a phantom pain, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the storm raging within him. He replayed the events in his mind, a frantic, looping reel of images. Aizawa's bloodied face. All Might's pained grimace. Shigaraki's hateful, manic eyes. The raw, unthinking power of the Noma. And then there was the other memory, the one that felt both alien and intimately familiar. The feeling of the ground beneath his feet not as a passive surface, but as an extension of his own being. He had commanded it. He had willed the earth to rise, and it had obeyed. He was an airbender. He was an earthbender. The concepts were so immense, so reality-shattering, that his mind struggled to contain them. It was like trying to hold the sky and the mountains in his two hands. He was the Avatar. The word echoed in the quiet of his room, both a promise and a burden. It was a title that belonged to legends, to figures of myth who had lived in a different, more spiritual age. Now, it belonged to him, a nervous, analytical teenager who had spent most of his life as a powerless nobody. The weight of it was crushing. How could he possibly learn to master these forces? All Might was a phenomenal mentor, but he was a fading ember, his own connection to the elements severed. He could provide the philosophy, the history, but he couldn't teach the practice. He couldn't show Izuku how to feel the earth, how to guide the wind. Izuku was on his own. He remembered All Might's advice from the first day of his training. Meditate. The elements are always speaking. You just haven't learned the language yet. He had tried before, with no success. But now, something was different. 2 of the gates were open. The channels were there, however faint. He had to try. He slid out of bed and sat on the floor, crossing his legs in a posture he had only seen in old drawings. He closed his eyes, forcing his frantic thoughts to slow. He focused on his breathing, the simple in and out rhythm that was the foundation of all life. Inhale. Exhale. He tried to shut out the noise of the city, the distant wail of a siren, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. He listened for something else. He reached out with his senses, not just his physical ones, but with that other, deeper sense that had twice awakened in moments of crisis. He reached for the feeling of the air in the room, its gentle currents stirring the dust motes. He reached for the feeling of the floorboards beneath him, the concrete foundation of the apartment building, the solid bedrock of Musudafu deep below. At first, there was nothing. Just the familiar darkness behind his eyelids, and the cacophony of his own anxious thoughts. Did I do the right thing? What if I had been too slow? What does Shigaraki want? Who made that Nomu? What if All Might had died? Breathe, Izuku. A voice, calm and warm, seemed to whisper in his mind. It wasn't All Might's. It was softer, gentler, feminine. He pushed the anxious thoughts away, focusing on the voice, on the simple command to breathe. Slowly, the darkness behind his eyelids began to change. It wasn't black anymore. It was a deep, swirling gray, like a thick fog. It was disorienting, and a wave of vertigo washed over him. He felt as though he was untethered, floating in an endless, misty void. Panic began to set in, but the calm voice returned. Do not be afraid, child. This place is a part of you. It is a part of us. He forced himself to relax, to accept the strange, new reality. As his fear subsided, the fog began to thin, and shapes started to coalesce in the gloom. He was standing on a floor of shifting ethereal mist. Around him, in a wide circle, stood figures. They were indistinct at first, like silhouettes made of shadow and starlight. There were 7 of them. He recognized one immediately. The towering, skeletal form of Toshinori Yagi, All Might, as he truly was. But he wasn't gaunt and weary here. He stood tall, and a faint, golden aura pulsed around him, the last embers of his connection to this place. But it was the figure beside him who drew Izuku's attention. She was a woman with kind eyes and a warm, compassionate smile. Her black hair was tied back, and she wore a simple, practical outfit. A faint, silvery aura, like moonlight, swirled around her. She was the owner of the voice. Nana? Toshinori said, his voice echoing in the strange space. His voice wasn't directed at Izuku, but at the woman. You can manifest this clearly? He has opened 2 of the gates, Toshi, she replied, her voice filled with a warmth that felt like a physical embrace. She turned her gentle eyes to Izuku. His connection to the spirit is growing stronger. He has made this place more solid. Izuku stared, his mind reeling. Nana Shimura. All Might's master. The seventh user of One for All. He had only ever seen her in old photographs. You're real, he stammered, the words feeling foolish as soon as he said them. Nana smiled. As real as memory, child. As real as the legacy that now flows through your veins. We are the vestiges of One for All. The echoes of the avatars who came before. Izuku looked around the circle. The other figures were beginning to gain clarity. To Nana's right stood a man with a wild mane of black hair and a stern, intense expression. Scars crisscrossed his face, and a faint, dark energy seemed to cling to him. This was the fourth user, Haikyuji Shinomori, the one who had possessed the danger sense quirk. Next to him were two others Izuku recognized from All Might's brief explanations. The fifth, a jovial-looking man with a bald head named Daigoro Banjo, whose black whip quirk had so terrified Izuku in a previous dream. And the sixth, a man in a high-collared visor named En. But it was the last two figures that truly took his breath away. They were different. They did not look like modern heroes. They were dressed in attire that belonged to a different age, a different world. One was a man with a kind, weathered face and the distinctive arrow tattoos of an air nomad master on his forehead and hands. He wore flowing yellow and orange robes and held a long, wooden glider staff. His aura was a brilliant, almost blinding white, like a miniature sun. He looked at Izuku with an expression of profound, ancient wisdom. The other figure was a woman. She was impossibly tall, towering over even All Might's skeletal form. She was clad in ornate green armor and elaborate face paint, her expression a mask of stern, uncompromising severity. Her hands were folded before her, and a pair of golden war fans were tucked into her sash. Her aura was a deep, solid green, like ancient jade, and it radiated an almost terrifying sense of immovable power and authority. This was not just a meeting of the users of One for All. This was a council of avatars. This is the vestige world, All Might, or rather, the vestige of Toshinori, explained, his voice echoing with the collective weight of the spirits beside him. The true gift, and the true burden, of the avatar spirit. It is not just power that is stockpiled, my boy. It is life. Experience. Wisdom. We are all here, within you. A part of you. Izuku's mind was a whirlwind of questions. But how? I thought I was just meditating. Meditation is the key that unlocks the door to the spirit world, Nana Shimura explained, her voice as soothing as a calm breeze. For most, it is a place of quiet reflection. For the avatar, it is a crowded room. She gestured to the figures around them. When you are awake, we are whispers, instincts, fragments of memory. But here, in the quiet space between the physical and the spiritual, we can commune. The towering woman in green armor took a step forward. Her movement was deliberate, and the misty floor seemed to solidify beneath her feet. Her voice, when she spoke, was a low, resonant rumble, like the shifting of tectonic plates. So this is the new one, she said, her sharp eyes scrutinizing Izuku, weighing and measuring him. He is small. And he looks frightened. Now, Kyoshi, be gentle, the air nomad said, his voice warm and melodic. He is but a child, thrust into a world of chaos he did not create. The world is always in chaos, Yangchen, the armored woman replied, her gaze never leaving Izuku. That is its nature. The avatar is not meant to be gentle. The avatar is meant to be the rock against which the storm breaks. He flinched in the face of conflict. He allowed his teacher to be broken. Weakness. The word struck Izuku like a physical blow. He remembered his paralysis as he watched the Noma pummel Aizawa. He had been weak. That is unfair, Nana Shimura interjected, stepping between Izuku and the imposing figure of Avatar Kyoshi. He acted. He stood his ground against a foe that even All Might could not defeat alone. He unlocked the gate of substance through sheer force of will. He showed the spirit of an earthbender, even if he did not know it. Kyoshi raised a skeptical eyebrow. He showed the spirit of a cornered animal. There is a difference. Justice requires a firm hand, not a desperate gamble. She turned her piercing gaze back to Izuku. You have my element stirring within you now, boy. Do not dishonor it with hesitation. Only justice will bring peace. Remember that. Her presence was overwhelming, an avalanche of pure, uncompromising will. Izuku felt an urge to shrink away, to apologize for his very existence. Peace is a delicate flower, Kyoshi, the air nomad, Yangchen said, stepping forward. Her presence was the opposite of Kyoshi's. Where Kyoshi was a mountain, Yangchen was the sky. Her aura was light, expansive, and filled with a deep, sorrowful compassion. It cannot be forged with a hammer alone. She smiled at Izuku, and her eyes held the wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes. You have my element as well. The breath of freedom. But you have learned to use it as a weapon, as a shout. You must learn to use it as a whisper. It is the element of evasion, of deflection, of preserving life, even the lives of your enemies when possible. It is the hardest path, for it requires the greatest empathy. She sighed, a sound that seemed to contain all the world's sadness. A lesson I confess that I myself struggled with. Izuku stared at them, speechless. Avatar Kyoshi, the legendary Earthshaker who had carved an entire island from a continent. Avatar Yangchen, the revered air nomad saint who had brokered peace with the spirits. They were real. And they were inside his head. Why are you all here? He finally managed to ask. Why now? It was Tashinori who answered. Because you need us. I can no longer guide you in the specifics of the elements. My own connection is too damaged. I am a library whose books have all been burned. I can tell you the titles, the themes, but I cannot let you read the pages. He gestured to the ancient avatars. But they are the living books. They are your masters now. We cannot control you, Yangchen clarified, her voice gentle. We are echoes. But we can teach. We can offer our wisdom, our experience. When you meditate, when you connect with the spirit, you can learn from us. You can learn the katas of the firebenders, the fluid forms of the water tribes, the rooted stances of the earth kingdom, the spiraling motions of the air nomads. The knowledge is all here. But it will not be easy, Kyoshi's stern voice cut in. We will test you. We will push you. The world you face is one of unprecedented imbalance. This, all for one, is a blight upon the very concept of spiritual succession. He is a void that consumes, the antithesis of the avatar cycle. To face him, you must be more than a bender of elements. You must be a master of yourself. A new figure stepped forward from the mist. He was dressed in the ornate red and gold robes of a Fire Nation sage, his face lined with age and wisdom, and a magnificent topknot adorning his head. His aura was a steady, controlled orange, like the heart of a forge. Izuku did not recognize him. And you must learn the nature of the fire within, the man said, his voice calm and measured. The element you have yet to touch. The element of power. He looked at Izuku with knowing eyes. You fear it, do you not? You have seen its destructive potential in your friend, the explosive one. You associate it with rage, with destruction. Izuku thought of Bakugo, of his relentless, fiery aggression. He thought of Endeavor, the current #2 hero, whose entire persona was built on a terrifying, all-consuming inferno. He nodded. Fire is not merely destruction, the fire sage continued. It is life. It is passion. It is the drive to create, to change, to live. It is the sun that warms the earth and gives life. But uncontrolled, it consumes everything. Your predecessor, he nodded respectfully to Tashinori, was a master of his inner fire. His passion became the charisma that inspired an age of peace. He was the symbol of peace because he was a symbol of hope, and hope is the purest form of fire. He looked at Izuku. To master firebending, you must master the passions within you. Your anger, your joy, your love, your grief. You must accept them, understand them, and channel them. If you let them control you, they will burn you from the inside out. But if you control them, you will hold the power of the sun in your hands. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming. It was a lifetime of study, of training, laid out before him in this strange, misty space. He had to learn the freedom of air from a saint, the unyielding justice of earth from a warrior queen, and the disciplined passion of fire from a wise sage. And he hadn't even met his waterbending master yet. He felt a pull, a sensation like being drawn backwards through water. The misty world began to fade, the figures of the avatars becoming indistinct silhouettes once more. Your consciousness is returning to the physical world, Nana Shimura's voice said, a fading echo. The connection can only be held for so long at first. Remember my words, boy, Kyoshi's stern voice rumbled. Hesitation is the enemy of justice. And remember mine, Yunchin's gentle voice whispered. Compassion is the soul of freedom. We will be waiting, the fire sage said. When you are ready to face the flame. The last thing he saw was the proud, encouraging smile on Toshinori's face before the fog consumed everything, and he was plunged back into darkness. He gasped, his eyes flying open. He was back in his room. The first rays of dawn were painting the sky outside his window in shades of pink and orange. He was sitting on the floor, his legs still crossed, his body stiff. Had it been a dream? No. It was too real, too vivid. He could still feel the phantom weight of Kyoshi's stare, the gentle warmth of Yunchin's compassion. He pushed himself to his feet and walked to his window, looking out at the waking city. The world looked different. It was no longer just a collection of buildings and people. He could feel, in a way he never had before, the currents of air weaving between the skyscrapers. He could sense the immense, sleeping weight of the earth beneath the pavement. The city was a living, breathing thing, a complex ecosystem of stone and sky, and he was connected to it. He was not alone in his journey. He had a council within him. A team of legendary masters ready to teach him everything they knew. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued him were still there, but now they were joined by something else, a profound sense of purpose. His phone buzzed on his nightstand. It was a message from Ida, a group text to all of Class 1A. Good morning, everyone. Let us all remember to conduct ourselves with dignity and composure as we return to school today. The media presence will likely be significant. We must represent the heroic spirit of UA, school. Right. In the face of his spiritual awakening, he had almost forgotten the mundane reality of his life. He was still a high school student. He still had English homework, but as he got dressed, pulling on the familiar UA uniform, it felt different. It was no longer a costume he was pretending to deserve. It was a symbol of the path he was on, a path that was now clearer than ever before. He had to become a pro-hero, yes. But his true duty ran much deeper. He had to reintroduce balance to a world that had forgotten the very meaning of the word. He had to master the elements, master himself, and become the avatar the world so desperately needed. He looked at his reflection in the mirror. He saw the same messy green hair, the same freckled face. But his eyes were different. There was a new depth to them, a flicker of ancient light. It was the light of 1,000 lifetimes, a council of vestiges, waiting for him to be ready. The real training had just begun.